In this part, we are going to learn about two new widgets. They're called Combobox and spinbox. And let me show you what we are going to make. It's going to look like this. This is the app for this part. And a Combobox is basically a drop-down menu. In here, I can select different items, and then I can also get the item and place it, for example, inside of a label. A spinbox is this kind of selection menu entry thing where I always have predefined values. This could either be a number, or it could be a letter, or literally anything else. So this is what we are going to create, and it's not that hard to make. All you really need is a basic widget, and you have to assign a list of values to this widget. And also you can connect a tkinter variable to select this widget and use it for basically anything else. That is all we need, so let's jump into some code and let's have a look at this. Here we are in the code, and I already have a few lines of tkinter code. If I execute all of this, we can see a basic window. By now, all of this should be fairly familiar. And I want to start by creating a Combobox. This we do with ttk.combobox. In here, as always, we are going to need a master, which in my case, as always, is going to be the window. On top of that, like any other widget, I want to assign the widget to a variable. Let me call it combo. Once we have that, I can pack this Combobox, fix my typo, and run the code. And there we can see a drop-down menu, although right now it doesn't have any values. To get the values, we need some kind of list. Let me create one, let me call it items. And this is just going to be a list, and I think for the demo I used ice cream, I had pizza, and I had broccoli. You might notice I am recording all of this right before lunch. But this list I now want to assign to this Combobox. And this we do, well, we can do it in a couple of different ways. The one you probably want to use is by going with values, and in here, assign the items. If I run the code now, and I select the drop-down menu, we can see the different items. In here, this one is working pretty well. Alternatively, besides this values, you could also use either config or configure. And then here, you can set the values to whatever the items are. Like so. This line and this line do the same thing, which means I can comment out the first one, run this again, and we have the same items in the drop-down menu. As always, I would recommend this one here because it is more concise, but both options are perfectly valid. Besides that, what you can do is to create a tkinter variable. Let me call it the food string, and this one is going to be a tk string var. And this string var you can assign to this Combobox with a text variable. I want to assign the food string. Although if I run the entire thing, by default, nothing is going to happen, which means the box is empty when we start the app. The reason for that is that we don't set a starting value for this food string. That is quite easily changed. All you have to do is set a starting value, and I want to get the items and select, let's say, the first one. That way, on startup, the selected item should be ice cream. Let's try. And there we go. We have ice cream in here, and we could select something else. Still, this works just fine. And for the basics of a Combobox, this is basically all we need. Although there's one more really cool thing that you can do, and that is events for a Combobox. Like we have seen in the last part, you can get the Combobox like any other widget and bind an event to it and then run a function. And the Combobox has one special event that is unique to it. And this you call with a double smaller than and a double greater than symbol. And in here, you have to type in Combobox selected. What this does is it executes a function every time we are selecting any kind of item inside of it. Let me create a lambda function with an event in here, and I just want to print test anytime we are selecting an item inside of this Combobox. So if I run the code now, and I select pizza, we get test. I select broccoli, we get test. This one is working just fine. I guess something slightly more useful here, we could get the food string and then get the value. That way, we are going to print whatever value is being selected. So right now we have ice cream, then we have pizza, and then we have broccoli. That way, you can extract the values from this combo box quite easily. As always, using the tkinter variable with get is the best way to get any kind of value and pass it around. It's fairly simple. And this you can now connect, for example, to a label. And this is going to be ttk and label with the window as the master. And this combo label I want to pack on the window. If I run this, we can see that we can't see anything. Let me add some text in here so we can see what's going on. Here we have a label. So if I run this again, we can see a label. This label I now want to change to whatever is selected inside of the combo box. For this one, you could work with the tkinter variable, the food string. For example, what you could do is set the text variable and set this one to the food string. If I run this now, we already have ice cream. If I select pizza, we have pizza. And if we have broccoli, I have broccoli. That is one way to approach it. Although it's quite limited because we can't influence the string. So I don't actually want to do it. Instead, what I want to do is when I'm clicking on Combobox selected, I want to get my combo label and I want to run config on it. In here, I want to set the text, and the text is going to be an f string with selected value is going to be the food string and get. Now I can run this again. By default, we get a label, but as soon as we select anything, we get selected value pizza or broccoli or ice cream. And well, this is basically all we need. So this is a combo box, and this is pretty much all you need. The main things you have to understand is that all of this is just a widget. The main difference compared to other widgets is you have to create a list and assign this list to the values. Other than that, you can use it like any other widget with a tkinter variable and then with events. Although there's one special event, Combobox selected. So with that covered, we can cover the next kind of widget, and that is called a spinbox. And I realized I have Combobox with lowercase c, it should be an uppercase c. That kind of annoyed me. A spinbox works very, very similar compared to a Combobox, which is why I covered them in the same bit. You are creating it with ttk.spinbox. And in here, you need a master, which is going to be the window. This I also want to assign to a variable. I'm going to call this one spin. Once we have that, I can pack the entire thing and run the code. We have another widget that is an entry field with up and down arrows where we can select predefined values. And now, like for the combo box, to assign actual values, you have to get spin, then the value, and now you need some kind of list. This could, for example, be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I now run the entire thing, we can select between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Although, since you very often work with numbers inside of a spinbox, there is an easier way to get lots of numbers. What you have to do is to define a from, and really important here, you need an underscore. And this is determining the start value. Let me set this one to a 3, completely random values. And then you need a 2, and this one doesn't have an underscore. Let's set this one to 20. The underscore next to from here, you always need, and if you don't add it, you're going to get an error. There are some predefined values that you cannot mess with. Don't forget that, it's a very easy mistake to make. Once we have defined this from and to value, we can run the entire thing again. And now, if I click on up, we get the values from 3 all the way to 20. Another thing that you could do in here is to add an increment value. This is essentially the step size. For example, if I set this to a 3, run the entire thing again. Now we are starting with a 3, but then we move in increments of 3. Although here you do have to be a bit careful. Let me go all the way up, and I do reach the highest value of 20. And now if I go down, we have 17, 14, and 11. So the numbers here are not consistent. It's a little bit annoying. Basically what tkinter does it tries to go as high as it can get in terms of the to number. But if it gets to a 21, in our case with the increment of 3, it limits the maximum number to a 20. So that way we're actually changing the number and the increment doesn't really work anymore. It's just something to be aware of. It can be kind of annoying, but quite workable. There are two more things that I do want to cover. The first one is that there is a command inside of a spinbox. In here, for example, we can use lambda without any parameters and just print a button was pressed. Or I guess arrow is a bit clearer, because if I run this again, and I'm running this command every time I'm clicking on an arrow. If you want to have a bit more control, so you only want to run a function if the user presses up or down, you couldn't use command, but like the Combobox, a spinbox has special kinds of events, two actually. We can use spin and bind an event with a function, and the event here is, once again, we need a string, and now two smaller than and two greater than operator signs. Inside of this, we have increment and we have decrement. Increment is triggered when we press the up arrow, decrement when we press the down arrow. And this we can connect to a lambda event. I just want to print either up or I want to print down. Now I can run the entire thing again, and if I press on up, we get up and an arrow was pressed, and the same with down, an arrow was pressed. Depending on the level of control you want to have, you can either use command or you can use an event. Both work perfectly fine. Finally, the last thing you want to be aware of is you can use spin along with the tkinter variable. For example, I could create a spin integer, and this is going to be tk int var. In here, you could also, as always, define a start value. Let's go with 12. This spin integer, I now have to connect to the spinbox. And for that, I want to separate all of this over multiple lines. That way you can see it a bit better. In here, I want to create a text variable, and this is going to be the spin integer. And now we have 12 as the start value. And I can change it like so. And this would also update the integer. For example, if I print the value, instead of an arrow was pressed, I want to get spin integer and get. And now if I run this again and I press up or down, we get the various numbers. Very simple to work with. Most of this should be quite familiar at this point. And with that, there's only one more thing that I do want to do for this video, and that is an exercise. I want you guys to create a spinbox that contains the letters A, B, C, D, and E. On top of that, what I forgot to copy in is I want you guys to print a value whenever the value is decreased inside of the spinbox. So pause the video now and try to implement this one. I am going to start by creating exercise letters, and this is going to be a list with A, B, C, D, and E. Once we have that, I want to create an exercise string. And this is going to be a tk string var. And then here, I do want to have a start value, like we have seen in the Combobox with this part up here. I want to get my exercise letters and select the first item. Once I have all of that, I should probably create the exercise spinbox, and this is going to be ttk.spinbox. In here, for the master, as always, we have the parent, and I want to have a text variable, which is going to be the exercise string. Let me put this exercise spin on the window widget with pack, and now we already have a start value. The problem is, let me run this again actually, just to demonstrate what's happening. If I start the app, we already have another spinbox that says A. That happens because of this string var here. However, if I press up, we're getting to 0. The reason for that is that we haven't assigned these letters as the values for this spinbox. That we can do quite easily. you could either get the exercise spin and then get the values and assign the exercise letters in here. If I run this now, I can go up and down and we get the different letters. Although, if you already know that you want to have this list inside of this widget, you can just, when you create it, assign the values with the exercise letters, and then I can get rid of this one here, and we should have the same result. So now I have the same result. That is pretty good. We are nearly done. We have covered the first part. Now we have to work on the second one, that I want to print a value whenever the value is decreased. And this we have covered up here. I only want to print a value when we are decrementing the value. I want to get my exercise spin and bind an event. The event I want to bind is going to be decrement. And inside of this, I want to get my lambda with an event. And here, I want to print the exercise string, and I just want to get the value. That should be all I need. If I run the code now and I press up, nothing happens. But if I press down or I decrement, we get the different letters. So with that, we are done. And this is giving us 2 new widgets that are quite useful, especially Combobox, I feel, is a really commonly used widget.